This is the first step along your path to a gateway.
This is your first step on your path to a gateway. Anyway, so this is a deep dive into the GATE project, the Gifted and Talented Education. I have this broken down by category, and the GATE program, aka the Gifted and Talented Education, or known as G.A.T.E or G.A.T.E or even TAG. It all depended on where it was and where you're located when this was going on. A lot of times you'll get things dating back to either the 80s, sometimes 70s, and testimonials even from the 60s. Let's just get started because there's a lot to go through. GATE was supposedly created for those who were higher on the academic ladder, so that way they could get the correct education that they deserved and needed in order for them to progress. These classes were not in your normal schoolroom or in the building. Sometimes they were in the building, but they'd take you to a other room that either you didn't really know about, or it was some other, let's say, education room that just wasn't used. Other than that, there are reports of people being taken off their normal school campus and going to a gifted and talented education facility. As to where these are, they vary, but they were all over the country at different points in time. So other than giving them the opportunity to progress, they would also give them more challenging courses higher than the average curriculum that they were getting. What would normally happen from a lot of these testimonials is that you'd be sitting in class and everything would be going according to plan, according to your daily agenda. And all of a sudden, somebody would walk into the classroom, come up to you and say, we have to go somewhere. We have to go do a test really quick. Or they would say something along those lines to get you to come out of the classroom with them. And this had to have been in conjunction with the teacher, because they would let these people come in and take you out. And so you would usually be taken out solely. So it's just you. There are other people who have said that they've gone with other people. It all, again, depends on who's telling this. And when you go there, you're given these tasks that you're not necessarily briefed on why you're supposed to be taking them. The tests that were given varied drastically. Some of them would come off as hearing tests, IQ tests, and pattern recognition tests. However, things weren't exactly going how they appeared, allegedly. But to fully understand where and how all of this came to be, you have to understand the history of what GATE came from, and its own history, as well as its supposed involvement into a couple other things that are concerning to say the least. And I'm not talking like too much cereal in your milk. All right, so GATE formally, in a way, began in 1901. The first school that actually opened for the gifted and talented was actually in Worcester, Massachusetts. It ended up becoming a government program in 1988 due to the Jacob Javits Gifted and Talented Students Education Act, an act that would focus on supporting and the integrity of this program across the country. And to double down and fully understand what that is, we need to go back to 1859. Get your dusters out. We're going back. We're going back, boys. It's about to get dusty. Hope you played the Oregon Trail. We're all about to die of dysentery. And that's if we're lucky. Back in 1859, there was a guy named Charles Darwin. If you don't know who Charles Darwin is, I am so sorry for you. Anyway, Charles Darwin published his theory of natural selection. And if you don't know what that is, again, I am so sorry, and I'm surprised you're still watching this. Anyway, just to break this down really quick, we're getting into the basis of what eugenics are. 1865. Sir Francis Galton applies eugenics to humans, saying we can do the same for humans, and this caused the deaths of numerous people as laws were implemented to sterilize those who were deemed criminals, insane, the handicapped. And like, you think about the criminal histories of certain people back in the day. All you had to do was say no to certain people or sneeze at the wrong time, and all of a sudden you're behind bars. So you'd end up getting sterilized for saying pardon me and then farting on a baby or something. I don't know. You die. You get sterilized. And it's not like, oh, you can't have kids. It's like, well, who's using the term of sterilization? As well as those who were considered feeble-minded, and even if you had epilepsy. Kind of comes off almost witch trial-y, doesn't it? Well, an unknown number of people were ended this way. And it's suspected that it's in the hundreds of thousands. And that is including the 65,000 deaths of Americans. And apparently this came to be because they were worried about the decline in human births. Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, 1868 came around and the first known attempt for higher education came to be. And this was at the hands of William Torrey Harris. And every week or so, if a child was performing well, they'd be pushed further ahead of their other classmates. And before long, word had spread about the success and made its way into the school systems within New Jersey and Massachusetts. 1901, the first school actually opens, drawing in kids from everywhere, at least if you were in the local area. All right, so this one I have to pick my words carefully because I don't want to get canceled here. So anyway, 1904, the Daytona Normal and Industrial Institute opens. It was first named the Daytona Literacy and Industrial Training School for certain word girls. Just think segregation shit, okay? So this only came to be because of somebody named Mary McLeod Bethune, who was the person to end up opening it because she believed that the education system was the way to racial advancement. You know, if you're smarter, you don't look at people's race. Founding the National Council of, insert word here, women in 1935, later becoming the first African-American woman to head a federal agency in 1939. See, it's not all fucking dark, shitty rainbows and getting fucking pooped on by the person hiding in the alleyway. There's some good things that are happening, but we're about to go into 1916. 1916. Lewis Terman claimed that test results were inferior when it came to testing African Americans and Spanish-speaking people, saying that they had an inherited biological difference, using this as his platform to preach about segregation in schools. This man then ends up helping create what we now know as the IQ test, believing that the giftedness within those children will end up showing itself through those IQ tests. And of course, it was initiated into the system. He went as far as to say that this gift could come from any social stance. You could be poor, you could be rich. But when it came to making his point about everything, he also included that Hispanics and African Americans were untalented and wanted them to have separate classrooms. What a big poo-poo head. Why'd I say that? I went somewhere for a second. 1917, the Great War is raging on. If you don't know, it's the Great War, it's the First World War, World War I. Well, the alpha and beta tests were created during World War I, finding those who were capable of writing, reading, math, and other tests. Well, this was a way of garnering the public's trust. 1920, research into mental inheritance had boomed and mixed with the notion that the public school could not reach the limits of those gifted children, which then pushed for another movement. Well, Lewis Terman and Leta Hollingworth led the first research on gifted children. They had been focused on the inheritance of giftedness. In 1921, the Terman study takes place, aka the genetic study of genus. The tests end up taking place at Stanford University, exploring the development and characteristics of those given children, or at least those who were thought to be gifted. And they did this from their childhood into their adult years. From what we know, they have followed over 643 students. But they wouldn't call them students. Can you take a guess at what they called them? Think something mean. Think horrible. Not too horrible, but what the hell? Why are you doing this? They used to call them, put it down in the comments, termites. Why? Why would you call these kids termites? They only used it for them, and apparently calling them this their entire lives. I'm guessing this was part of the test to see how they fought back or something. I don't know how that goes into giftedness if you're calling these gifted children termites. If the gifted are considered termites, what are the rest of everybody? And according to everything that we've come across, is that even to this day, this is the longest ongoing study in psychology. 1935, Dr. Martin Jenkins collects evidence on the intellect of black people, proving that both black people and white people have the same intellect. There is no difference. 1936, Lita Hollingworth opens the Spire School, which was an experimental program for the gifted children. The ages involved were those between 7 and 9 years of age. And their whole focus was to learn how quickly these gifted children learned, focusing on their rapid intellect, or the rapid rate of learning, I should say. Clearly, I'm not there. These were considered educational derivatives, only giving them to the people who were at the top of their class and the lowest of their class. And she would end up following them for about 5 years. 1938, the Public Bronx High School of Science is founded. The founder and first principal, Dr. Morris Meister, was under the belief that gifted students were being neglected by the public school system. By 1940, the public Hunter College Elementary School opens. Another experimental school opens in Manhattan, gaining international appreciation for its academics and various options. 1947 rolls around and the IQ tests become a fundamental way into discovering whether a child is gifted or not. Filthy commoner. Get them out of the classroom. The idea had been gaining traction, though the government had slow reactions to this. First 4 states by 1947 that had been recognized by the federal government for trying to have higher education for these kids included California, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Yet, only 2 of them would officially receive funding. 1950, the NSF, the National Science Foundation, is created to help with the higher academics and looking heavily into mathematics, computer science, social science, as well as economics. 1954, segregation by race in the classroom is deemed unlawful and unconstitutional. And the National Association for Gifted Children is founded. 1956, refugees from Nazi Germany come over. Their names were George and Anna Marie Roper. And they established a school in Detroit in 1941. Their focus is that the foundation of a successful life is emotional well-being, since they figured that those were kind of being neglected in most of the other schools. It was all about the education, not necessarily about how these kids were reacting or feeling, or, like that part of them was suppressed. Well, in 1956, they decided to exclusively focus on those gifted children. 1957 is another year. Hold on. 1957 rolls around and Gifted Child Quarterly is published. And this was a way so that way the public can understand what to expect from those gifted children. This included findings that they had, as well as just the average, everyday stuff that you'd find from a gifted kid. The space race kicks off and then fuels America's need for more brilliant minds to work alongside of us. And thus the funding for the gifted and talented education system was raised. And by 1960, nearly every child in America had to take some type of aptitude test. And the amount of money that was ended up funneling into the education system had reached around $5.7 million, which meant that this budget was nearly triple the original. 1958, the NDEA, the National Defense Education Act, becomes law. President Eisenhower signs off on a bill that would provide funding to the states that would identify and educate those selected for those gifted programs. The programs were now well supported to test and identify the most, quote, suitable and able students, unquote, especially those who were interested in STEM, which is just, science, technology, engineering, and math. Well, by 1960, the government had seemingly dropped the ball when it comes to the gifted and talented education. as they were more focused on integration, Vietnam, and contemporary education and the disenfranchisement of the youth. 1964, the Civil Rights Act happens and brings equal opportunities. This leads the road to a better education system, allowing all to attend. However, this ends up closing a lot of those gifted and talented education classes and schools and systems. But this was due to the majority of all of those kids that were in those classes. The majority of them were white. So in the public eye, well, they came off as elitist. And of course, this is because of their intentional lack of education for anybody who was not white. So with all that in the public eye, and for them thinking that they were elitist, well, the government ends up moving funds to anywhere else. 1965, the ESEA Act is passed, which is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, passed by President Lyndon B. Johnson. Now, this is a man who believed in the full educational opportunity. And this was actually the largest federal education legislation to ever pass. This was one of those acts that was there to help the disadvantaged, disabled, struggling students and aiming to raise their achievements. This would offer funding to select schools in low-income areas, as well as special education centers, and basically overall funding for whoever really needed it. Education is for everyone. 1967, the BEA Act is passed, which is the Bilingual Education Act, which does the exact same for people who are non-English speakers as what I had just talked about for the people who are in low-income areas and at a disadvantage. 1971 begins the study of mathematically precious youth, or SMPY. Well, the founder of this was Julian C. Stanley. This would end up turning into a 50-year study that followed more than 5,000 people. All of these people were reportedly found or discovered before the age of 13. And it was at this point that they didn't want to continue following the same path that they had been, only going after the kids who were into STEM, you know? So they started searching in different avenues and different areas of focus. 1972, the Marlin Report is published. And this would end up with the first national legislation for the gifted. So with this newfound interest in looking outside the STEM outline that they originally had, they started looking into different avenues, which included like the performing arts, like guitar, singing, of course, still mathematics, psychology, as well as like psychomotor skills, which is the time that you like think about things and how well you're able to execute them. So just like your overall, like, can you be the best that you can be? Can you? Can you think of something and then do it? Cool. How quickly can you do it? Accurately. And that's not to be considered with like psychic skills or anything. Psychomotor and psychic skills, completely different. No Matilda things are happening right now. Just wait. That comes later. Actually, as far as we know, it's already happened. I don't know. 1974, Gerald Ford ends up signing the Education Amendment Act of 1974. Amending the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This ends up giving provisions to the gifted students, creating a federal office within the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Gifted and Talented. With this act enacted, this ended up giving funding to the states and districts that were supporting the gifted and talented education classes and schools. In 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act happens. This was a federal mandate to provide and serve children with disabilities and special education needs, ensuring free public education to all children who have a disability. Though there are some claims that this did not include the gifted children. And with that said, it's kind of unclear whether that means that if you are gifted and in that program, you're not getting the other funding from this act, or like where the line is drawn. It's a little vague when it comes to that. But from what they say, it does not include the gifted children. And this act is known to this day as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. In 1978, the Gifted and Talented Children's Education Act happens. A National Training Institute, the Federal Office for the Gifted, This was supposed to amend the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, so they could make special programs for the children who were gifted. Well, this ended up giving incentive to states to start creating their own gifted and talented educational programs. However, this bill was repealed. In that same year, an American psychologist by the name of Joseph Renzulli creates what is known as the three-ring model, which is able to describe the gifted behavior, which he believes comes from an intersection of above-average ability, high creativity, and high task commitment. 1979, the Center for Talented Youth, or rather the Johns Hopkins Center of Talented Youth. Their mission is to provide excellent education for those who are gifted, as well as trying to understand how the gifted learn. In 1980, Congress raises the funding for the Gifted and Talented Office, or the official office, from $2.5 million to $6.2 to possibly $6.5 million. And it was during the 1980s that the IQ test, which they had once relied so heavily upon to find the gifted, seemed to wane a little. They started not focusing so much quite on how brilliantly educated they were, rather looking into how they could become that. 1981, Ronald Reagan's up to something. Well, Ronald Reagan signs the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, repealing the Gifted and Talented Children's Education Act of 1978. This results in the closure of the Office of Gifted and Talented, also stopping all funding to the gifted education. But lumped in this bill were 29 other programs, which ended up including the special education one. And it wouldn't be until 1988 that it would be reinstated under the G.A.T.E Act, or G.A.T.E Act, I think it's G.A.T.E Act. In the same year of 1981, SENG is created, that's S-E-N-G, and that's Supporting Emotional Needs of the Gifted, bringing to attention the different emotional needs of those gifted. And they host annual conferences. 1983, MI comes around. MI? That's Multiple Intelligence Theory. A developmental psychologist and professor by the name of Howard Gardner had invented this theory. So basically the theory goes like this. You have a different mind, I have a different mind. We probably have a different way of learning. Seems pretty basic, doesn't it? Like, it took till now to come up with that. He goes as far as to say that everybody has 7 different types of intelligences, and they all vary from different levels to different levels. Like, somebody could be really good at driving, you could be really good at baking. So there's 2 different levels of what you're trying to do, but everybody has these skills. He's quoted as saying the following, quote, "We are all able to know the world through language, logical mathematical analysis, spatial representation, musical thinking, the use of the body to solve problems or to make things, an understanding of other individuals, and an understanding of ourselves. Where individuals differ is the strength of these intelligences. The so-called profile of intelligences, and in the ways in which such intelligences are invoked and combined to carry out different tasks, solve diverse problems, and progress in various domains." 1988. The Jacob Javits Gifted and Talented Education Act. The act is named after the New York Senator Jacob Javits. Apparently, he had been promoting the progression and the success of the gifted education, giving federal funding to students. The focus here was to raise the abilities of the gifted as well as make sure the education system was meeting the needs of children, because apparently there's been a history of them neglecting them, either emotionally or what have you, allegedly. And apparently he was taking a very strong standpoint on being able to give the limelight to people who were in the gifted and talented education who weren't necessarily looked favorably upon beforehand. So finding people that were either hitting in the back of the room or what have you. But apparently in order to do this, they had to use innovative strategies. Seems a little vague. In 1990, Connecticut establishes the National Research Center on the Gifted and Talented, and this had been funded under the G.A.T.E Act. Their mission here was to try to figure out a better way in identifying those who had gifts or those who were able to develop them better, as well as looking for those people who were having those abilities starting to emerge. Kind of a weird way of wording that. In 1991, there was a group called the Columbus Group who wanted to change the definition of the word giftedness. Well, the Columbus Group was a bunch of practitioners, theorists, and like parents who were in and around the GATE kids, or they were the GATE kids, and they wanted to change people's perspective of what that meant, because it almost created this type of divide where it was like you were on a pedestal, like, oh, I'm gifted. It wasn't look like that. Well, I guess, and not even to put it in my own words, I'm just going to read what the Columbus Group said in 1991. The Columbus Group in 1991 was quoted saying, quote, "Giftedness is asynchronous development in which advanced cognitive abilities and heightened intensity combine to create inner experiences and awareness that are qualitatively different from the norm. This asynchrony increases with higher intellectual capacity. The uniqueness of the gifted renders them particularly vulnerable and requires modifications in parenting, teaching, and counseling in order for them to develop optimally." 1991, it's my year. It's my year, guys. It's mine. It's my time. I'm so happy to be born. Kill me now. 1991 through 1998, Project Synergy happens, which is a federally funded grant program developing strategies for identifying and helping disadvantaged gifted children. However, this is when they really kind of changed course, and instead of using their typical way of like tests and other things, they rely more on observing the potential candidates for GATE. They ended up working with 3 kindergartens in East Harlem, closely working with the kids, teachers, and parents. In 1992, the NAGC, which is the National Association of Gifted Children, finally open up their eyes and look at the prospects in the LGBT community. 1994, the G.A.T.E Act is reauthorized from the Improving America's School Act of 1994, appropriating $9.5 million to the G.A.T.E Act. This was after finding out that the needs of the gifted were not really being met. 1996, Miami, these researchers apparently claimed that they found a new way to identify the giftedness within the Hispanic and Black community. And they were saying that these were often people who were either not able to join GATE for whatever reason, or simply just overlooked somehow. It doesn't say what this way was, but they found a way. They found a way. In 1998, the NAGC, the National Association for Gifted Children, ends up publishing a book which guides out the 7 key areas for their program. 2002, the No Child Left Behind Act, aiming to hold schools accountable for academic results, made to try and close the gap for disadvantaged students, which in turn also caused a huge backlash, as it was a way that they were forcefully trying to bring all the children to the same level by using a statewide standardized test. Well, the schools that could not meet those standards were punished. However, this ended up not having anything for the gifted kids. It focused mainly on the people who were below the bar to bring them up, not for the people at the top to excel. And just like long ago, this would end up almost coming full circle in a way. Like long ago, there were only 4 states that had stuff for the gifted and talented education. And those states were Iowa, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Georgia. And some other states had tried to maintain their gifted and talented education systems and schools and classes, but eventually they all fell short and faded into memory. And that's where I'm going to leave it for the history of GATE, okay? Because it can continue on. I know it's in the 20s now, but like I'm just focusing on the early 2000s and before. The GATE kids who were around my age and our parents' age and so on. So with all of that education out of the way, let's get into the fun part of the conspiracies. It seems that just in the past few years, a numerous amount of people have come out with, let's say, forgotten memories or repressed memories. And these span from 1960 to the early 2000s. Most of the ones that I've personally seen either come from the 80s through early 2000s. Not to say I haven't seen other ones that go a little bit before then, but a lot of them are within that time frame of the 80s to, like, let's say 2004 to 2006. All of their tales and recollections of everything have a lot of weird similarities to them, but a lot of vastly different things too. But before we get into that, there are some things I need to mention on here. Okay, so starting off is that GATE can go by a bunch of different names. As I said, there were at certain points it wasn't federally funded. At certain points it was federally funded. Sometimes it went down to the states, sometimes it went down, it was federalized. So with that said, it went by many different names. And three of the most common ones that people have said that it would be named, if it's not GATE, which is just straight up gifted and talented education, it's TAG. But then there's the other one, which is just G.A.T.E, which is gifted and talented. I'm wondering if anybody who's watching has been in it and had a different name, let me know down in the comments. I'm interested in learning about this and trying to see what everything is. Two, the possibility of you being in GATE and not having the same experience as somebody else is completely fine. That happens. If you go to a park, you walk along the river, somebody else has a bird poop on them. It's two different experiences in the same area. But then you also have to wonder, were they in the same park? It's a park, but maybe it's not the park. You get what I'm saying? GATE, maybe it's not GATE, but acting like GATE. Never know. And for those of you who are watching that weren't in GATE or don't necessarily believe in it, well, just keep in mind that necessarily just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean that it didn't happen. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you've kept to yourself that if you told somebody, they wouldn't believe you. But you know for a fact it happened. Which really sucks when it comes to things like this, because then it just makes people feel like they're being gaslit and spiraling. So keep in mind that when we're talking about the CIA, you need to have an open mind that they may not necessarily be the agency that you are thinking that they are. They've done a lot of weird things. MK Ultra, domestic wiretapping, which they're not even supposed to do on US citizens, but shit has happened, and documents have come out. So not trying to paint them in one light or another, but I'm just saying shit happens, okay? And for those of you who would say that, okay, let's say if it was real, where's the evidence? Why wouldn't you have evidence? If you had evidence, wouldn't you just destroy it? Like, it doesn't matter if somebody's trying to file a FOIA act, a request of a document, okay? You think that's going to happen? If somebody asks you for all of your personal information, are you going to redact anything of it? Or are you just going to hand it over? Yeah, because you're not going to incriminate yourself. You're not going to do anything like that. You're not going to do anything that has any type of horrible backlash on you. So for that argument, when it's just like, okay, well, what happened with this? Or what happened with that? Dude, they can erase people. They can erase things. They can erase events or the evidence of events. There's a lot of things that can happen behind the scenes that we are completely unaware of. There's also the argument that, well, why aren't these people being silenced then? Like the people who are coming out and being the whistleblowers and stuff. Well, why would they? If there is no evidence to go on, and it's just some collective hive mind of an idea of something that happened or maybe didn't happen. You remember, it's all alleged because there's no actual proof or anything like that. You got like workbooks that you've seen, and you could find them on TikTok and everything, but there's nothing of substantial proof. Everybody is running in circles when it comes to this because no one has any way to really look. Everybody's running wild with their heads cut off. So no, they wouldn't silence them. They would just let them talk because why not? Whatever. It's just another internet thing. It's just another ARG, an alternative reality game. It's something fun for the people. Now, depending on whether you believe that or not is up to you. There's things out there you can look into. The things that I'm looking into, you can just Google it and find the CIA documents about Project Stargate and stuff like that, which we'll get into because, oh my God. All of that aside, yeah, all of this could be fake. It very much could be. It could be just a collective delusion of repressed or fucked up memories or something. It's just the brain is so impressionable and untrustworthy sometimes. But at the same time, if something like that happens, that's a perfect way of being like, oh yeah, no, that didn't happen. Your brain is misremembering this. You don't need to learn about this. No, it's completely fine. Get the fuck out of my face. Oh, okay, cool. One final mention about like the whole CIA thing is that like, even if they were not, let's say, directly involved in torture or anything like that, there's something called torture by proxy, just like war by proxy, and the proxy wars that you hear all about all over the place. It's just having somebody else do it. It's that third party. Condoleezza Rice was quoted saying, "The United States has not transported anyone and will not transport anyone to a country we believe he will be tortured. Where appropriate, the United States seeks assurance that transferred persons will not be tortured." However, it did come out that we were doing that. It's declassified, so it's not like any new news. It's just putting that in there, that like things can happen, and it's not believed until certain things come to light. But how much evidence do you need, and what do you classify as evidence, and can that evidence be trusted? Not many things people think about anymore. Things remembered by the GATE kids. One of the biggest ones is being pulled out of class at a random time while everything else was going on. And usually it was just that one person that was being led out of class by usually somebody that they didn't know, somebody that was apparently part of the school or maybe not even part of the school, who've then led you to another room somewhere in that facility, most times, if you weren't already taken off of campus for whatever reason. Usually the parents were somehow involved when it came to stuff like that. But that's where it kind of differs, because people who were actually in, let's say, the higher education classes, their parents were notified about certain things. Those aren't necessarily the GATE kids that people are talking about. When they're talking about GATE kids, they're talking about the people who have these really weird interactions and incidents in tellings of testing on them. So after you were taken into this other room, upon entering, there was either somebody standing just outside of the door or in the room, just like right onto your right. So right when you walk in, let's just say he or she is standing off to your right. And right when you walk in, they hand you a little cup, let's say like a little Dixie cup, that has this pink liquid in it. And you're told to drink it. And it's not what everybody thought was being like a fluoride tablet or fluoride or the pink tablets that they would give you at certain schools. This was not that. This was something else. A lot of claims saying that it felt chalky. Some claimed it being similar to Pepto-Bismol. There were other accounts saying that it tasted like candy, which kind of coincides with the fluoride ones with the bubblegum taste. But there were a crazy amount of recollections that didn't have that bubblegum taste. It was just chalky, bitter, like it's just weird. They forced these kids to drink it. Certain accounts will say that that's either upon entering or even leaving that they'd have you do that. And the argument in that is that a lot of the GATE kids believed that this was a way that they were making them misremember, or possibly just eradicating their memory and event entirely within them. And within this room, you would be seated facing away from the opening of the room, and you normally face like a wall. And if there was like some type of like, let's say a window, they would put something over the window to block that out. So there would be no light. You wouldn't be able to see anybody or anything. A person who like walked in there with you somehow would disappear, and there'd be this other person that was in there. It was usually the person that like handed you the pink fluoride stuff that people say is the pink fluoride stuff. Believe whatever you want, but while you're standing in there, the person would be having you do these tests, and these tests would vary day by day. It just depended on what you were, I guess, being aimed to be taught. But that's the thing, is that during these tests, it was never explained what you were doing, whether you succeeded or you failed. There was nothing. So basically, imagine you're sitting at a table facing away from somebody. You're not even allowed to look back. And they put these cards down in front of you, right? And they're Zener cards. So you have like a square. You have like these three wavy lines, a plus sign. They either put it in front of you, or if you already knew what like the images look like, they would be holding one card and they'd be standing behind you. And they would ask you what's on the card, but they wouldn't show it to you. They wouldn't do anything. It literally, you just sit down, what's on the card. It didn't matter if you were right or wrong. They would never give you anything. They would not lead you to believe that you succeeded or failed in any way. You couldn't hear it in tone. You couldn't see it in their mannerisms. It was just, they continued on. A lot of people say that, like the Zener cards specifically are for testing people for kind of like psychic activity, to being able to do like remote viewing. And some say that's the whole point of what GATE is that they were trying to train these kids into being able to have this profound perception and being able to kind of like navigate the astral realm and see certain things. And the scary part about that, there's CIA documents that actually talk about that, about going into the realm, like the next realm, the next area, the holographic realm and universe that we are in. It's expansive. It is crazy, but they have released documents about that and trying to go into the psyche and understand everything. And it's thought-provoking, I'll say that. If you've seen Welcome to Derry, or I guess even if you've seen The Shining, going back to that, it's basically what Dick Hallorann can do. There was another one that was either called the colored yarn test, or it was like a rubber band thing. So you had like oftentimes these were like blanks of wood that had the nails up in them. So it'd be like a 4x4 going all the way across. It had these weird timed puzzles of like trying to like discombobulate the thing and untangle it in a very certain amount of time. And sometimes you'd make it, sometimes you wouldn't. Again, no answer whether you were doing right or wrong. But why would a whole nother room be needed to take you out of your normal class to come in there and be like, all right, solve this? It's like, okay, cool. Like, wouldn't it be more beneficial to do that while you're almost being distracted by everybody else in your class to see if you can actually focus under pressure, then if that is what that is? And one of the other ones that is very concerning is the decoding of certain messages. And a lot of times it wasn't just random symbols being like, oh yeah, a square equals A, a trapezoid is B. It wasn't always like that. There were certain ones where it was like you had to decode Morse code. There was a really big one that I saw on TikTok of this girl showing her actual work. It wasn't just her talking about it. It was her showing her paperwork from some of the things that she did. And it was her decoding or like translating Russian, but she was like 6 and had no idea what she was doing. She said, I don't remember any of what this means. All I know is that this one part right here is my name. Shouldn't the kid be told what they're doing instead of just like going into it so blindly? And furthermore, did the parents know? Like that, it almost seems like it's shady. I'll say that it's shady. It's kind of weird, especially if you didn't. It's not like an elective to where you can go out and like learn these languages. It's just they're force feeding you it, and just like, oh, see, you just understood what this was. It's like, okay, that's a form of teaching people, I suppose. But one of the biggest ones that you'll always hear about when it comes to GATE is the hearing tests. And the headphones that you had to put on, these things were big and bulky. A lot of people, like I'm partially colorblind, but people are always saying that it's kind of like a grayish green. I always saw them as like gray or like slightly tan, so I don't know. These headphones that go all the way across and plug into a box. Now, there is something that goes along with that. They claim that it wasn't a hearing test. It wasn't like your typical beeps of like raising your hand, like certain accounts, they will say that happened. But not every account is talking about this voice that comes in. I don't know if I actually put it in the episode, but at the beginning I made a joke about like, you are now taking your first steps into a doorway. And that's how it starts off. It's supposed to like calm you and open you up into something else. Apparently this has a very, very disturbing similarity to what was considered the Gateway tapes. And those were from the Stargate project. The short and sweet of it, which I'll get into a bit more of it later when I talk about it, but it's basically hemi-syncing the brain, which is making both sides of your brain work in unison. And if I'm going to try to explain it right now, I'll do it better later. But basically, if you put one audio thing in here at like, I think it was 100 hertz, and then you put another one over here at 104 hertz, there's that 4-point depth differential. And when your brain hears that, it picks that up as a third response. And that causes your brain to sync together and then open up onto onto like a spiritual level, essentially. But that's what they were saying they were trying to get you to do, because it's like this meditative sound. I don't know quite how to explain it. If you want to take that upon yourself to look that up, you could find it on YouTube and TikTok, and I'm sure a bunch of other places. But be warned that a lot of people who didn't know that they were in the GATE project, once they hear this, it unlocks memories. And these are repressed memories, and they're not always good. A lot of times it's overwhelming fear and dread, like something is right there, like you're standing at the edge of a cliff and nothing is there beneath you but a black void. It's real fucking weird. Especially that so many people have this exact same feeling when they hear these things. They're like, the memories are unlocked and unleashed finally. Either way, it's thought-provoking, whether that be real, fake, just sci-fi BS or what. But there's an overwhelming number of people who have said the exact same thing. And at a certain point, what becomes more fact than fiction? One of the other tests that they would do is a vision test. It wasn't necessarily an actual vision test. They claimed that they were trying to test for color blindness, but there were a numerous amount of people that went in there that were already colorblind, either what have you, however severe it was. There were multiple people that went in there that were colorblind, and that was never flagged, and that was never brought up to them. So that wasn't a colorblind test. That wasn't a vision test like how that is. Yet that's what, however many people were told. Some people that were claiming that it was a way for them to see if you could detect the abnormalities within whatever image it was. They made you build with these random blocks that were 2D blocks, they're really flat, and they'd have you make weird things with them. Sometimes they were 2D, sometimes they were 3D. It all depended on what they wanted you to do. Again, no explanation. They also did Rorschach tests on all these kids for some reason. What do you see? What does this make you think of? What's the first word that comes to mind when you look at this? Why were they doing that? It just builds a weird ladder to either ascend or descend on. Either way, there's no platform to get out on. After all this testing, the memories, the missing memories, the altered state of consciousness. Why did all of these people misremember everything? There was just an entire chunk of life that they could not remember, or remember that they lived. They tried to think back and it was just, oh, you went from A to C without even realizing that B was there. And then one day you go online and you hear something that reminds you that B is there. It's always been there, but you never actually looked at it. It was always hidden, but it was always in front of you. We were just trained to not notice it. All of these people have missing memories. Not every single like official GATE kid, like as in like they learned, they went to these big buildings or anything, but some of them still claim that like a lot of these stories have some type of validity to them. There's a foot in the actual real world that we know and understand. To what reach of that understanding do we actually comprehend? Now we got to talk about a couple of things really quick. MK Ultra and Stargate. All right, we're here. We finally made it to the conspiracy corner. Yep. Now we got to talk about MK Ultra and the Stargate project because they're oddly similar. Oddly similar. Now we've heard it time and time again. MK Ultra, the mind controlling experiments, yada yada. Though this time it might have some merit. So MK Ultra was all about trying to manipulate the human behavior, trying to be able to control people essentially. And this officially ran from 1953 to 1973. Officially. And the Stargate project was started sometime between 1972 and 1978 and ran through 1995. And they were using ESP, which is extrasensory perception, to try to see, behind enemy lines and try to see things that they necessarily shouldn't, being able to astral project and all that fun stuff. So essentially the remote viewing. Wait, don't listen to him. Don't listen to him. That's not me. That's Pat 2. That's the other CIA drone guy. Don't listen. Stargate, yeah, so they were using ESP to try to look behind enemy lines and everything, but where did they get this information? I keep saying Monroe, and this person ended up making it. Well, the person who actually ended up making it was Robert Allen Monroe, and he was born on the 30th of October in 1915. And he would end up graduating Ohio State University in 1937 with a BA in English. Well, he would go on to be a writer and a director at 2 of the Ohio radio stations. And shortly after he moved to New York, he would end up making his own radio company running RAM Enterprises in the 1950s that had 28 monthly shows. In 1956, he reached an ultimatum, and he had to figure out if he was going to convert over to video or stick with sound, something that he was actually really good at and something that he was passionate about. He ends up going out and thinking, well, how can I help people learn while they sleep? Omelette du fromage. Does that sound familiar? You millennials out there? Omelette du fromage? No? It's Dexter's Laboratory. Well, in 1956, he decided that, he's going to start testing, but he needed people to test on, but he didn't have anybody to test on, so he tested on himself. And shortly after beginning his tests, he started feeling different. He started feeling like weird tinglings in his arms, and at certain points, he almost felt paralyzed. Well, this would end up reaching a critical point, when on a random Friday night that he decided, I'm going to go lay down next to my wife for a little bit and just kind of vibe out. And he doesn't remember falling asleep, but the next thing you know, something's hitting his face and then hitting the side of him, and he's like, what is that? He opens up his eyes and he's looking at the chandelier. He's like, I thought this was the floor. What is going on? And so he turns around, he looks back behind him, and there's somebody laying in bed with his wife, and he's like, oh my God, they are gorgeous. That's me. Oh, thank God. Awesome. Wait, what's going on? After that, he's like, that scared me a little bit. So he decided to go get checked out, and he got checked out by a doctor and a psychologist. And the psychologist was somebody close to him, somebody who was his friend. Both the doctor and the psychologist gave him a clean bill of health, both mentally and physically. And this would eventually lead him down the path of him explaining in his own words what he believes is the expanded state of consciousness. And in his tellings, he would refrain from using any spiritual, religious, or occult terminology, which then garnered him favor and credibility within the scientific community. And he related this feeling and the way it goes about as similar to the mechanism that happens within you when you go to sleep. In 1985, his research subsidiary company comes about as an independent nonprofit organization, becoming what we now know as Monroe University or Monroe Institute, and it sits on 300 acres of land in Faber, Virginia. And their goal or mission is to advance the global awakening of human consciousness. And you might be asking yourself, how were they trying to do this? How were they able to do this? What were they doing? They were using the gateway tapes. They were literally using the gateway tapes. That's how the hemisync happens. These are the tapes that were used in the Stargate project to hemisync your brain. You have 100 hertz signal in your left ear, while 104 hertz is in your right ear. And there is a 4 decibel differential, and that is how this frequency comes to be, apparently known as a brainwave frequency that you can reach. And the differential of 4 is interpreted as a third phantom beat in your brain because you can't actually hear it. Well, this is an auditory hallucination referred to as binaural beats. Binaural beats is what they're saying you are listening to when it comes to the Gifted and Talented education program. When you have the headphones on and you're trying to figure out what is this? This is your first steps into a doorway. That's what that is, binaural beats. Well, the third beat is only able to come about when both sides of the brain are working together, which causes the phenomenon known as the frequency following response. The brain syncs with the beat's frequency, resulting in the brain hemisyncing, which is both sides of the brain working together, and this is supposed to enhance focus and give you a sense of deep relaxation, enhance creativity, and allow for spontaneous out-of-body experiences. What do you mean spontaneous? However, a lot of the studies outside of Monroe Institute vary on the validity and accuracy of these tests. And if you go and read this release document about STARGATE, the STARGATE project, you'll kind of realize that it's a hybrid of a document. It has both scientific fact as well as pseudoscience mixed in with it, but it also goes as far as saying that we are in a holographic universe, and even gives you a kind of diagram, and they kind of give you like a rough idea about how certain images can be put onto like a 2D thing, but the long and short of it makes just me think of a CD with images and games and stuff on it, to where it's... Anyway, read the document. However, this comes from the idea that the universe is an arrayment of interacting energy fields, and it just so happens that the human consciousness is one of those interacting energy fields. And once you listen to these tapes, they're saying that you can manipulate it, and you can see the patterns. What? Claims from people who have been in this and been tested on and so on. There's good and bad from both of it, and they both just are similar to when the people are listening to, let's say, the tapes that are used in GATE, whether that be the actual gateway tapes or not. However, the good is astral projection, lucid dreaming, a deep trance-like state, heightened perception, and gut instinct, better emotional control, relief from anxiety, a sense of wonder, finding a newfound understanding of purpose, as well as manifestation. Apparently, you can manifest small desires if you get good enough. And some are saying use the, quote, patterning technique, which that is a technique that they go about in the STARGATE files. The bad. Fear, discomfort, and a sense of uneasiness. Some say it's so strong that they refuse to continue with the project or even listen to the tapes ever again. Many people who have come out about listening to the tapes tell of negative reactions upon hearing them, as if unlocking a hidden and dark memory. However, it's kind of weird because a lot of these claims that are saying that they're remembering things, if these tapes are from the STARGATE project, and after listening to them, why are they reminded of GATE? Why are they reminded of the gifted and talented education system if this is supposed to be for something completely different? What is it doing? It is to be mentioned that STARGATE and GATE have no direct interaction with each other, no connections or whatsoever. And it's even kind of foggy, as if Monroe Institute had anything to do with it. However, people have reached out, and this is exactly what they had to say. They quote, "Thanks for reaching out. We are aware of the questions circulating online suggesting a connection between Monroe Institute and grade school gifted programs. We appreciate the opportunity to clarify our role and provide accurate information. The Monroe Institute has never been directly involved in programs specifically targeting young children in elementary school settings. However, our sound technology is accessible to a wide range of professionals such as educators, therapists, and health providers throughout our professional division. These professionals may independently choose to explore its potential within their work, always subject to the guidelines and approvals of their respective organizations. We understand that technologies related to brainwave entrainment and consciousness exploration often attract curiosity, especially in light of historic programs involving research. However, the Monroe Institute has always operated independently, with a mission centered on empowering individuals through voluntary participation, education, and personal growth. We take pride in our transparency and commitment to providing accurate information about our work. We invite anyone with questions or a desire to learn to explore our site." Well, I guess you guys can go get it if you want. Go get tested on. All right, Pat 1 out. Don't tell him I'm alive. And of course, way back in the day, if you were to say and make any type of claim about a 3-lettered agency trying to do anything to you, you're just a conspiracy theorist. You're just running your mouth and trying to come up with these fabricated ideas and trying to be a fiction author, a science fiction author. But what if it did happen? What if it did become true? And what if it had always been true, even acknowledged by those 3-lettered agencies themselves, releasing certain documents and talking about what they had found and their process in which they had gone about giving things to people who weren't necessarily aware? It's out there. It's a fact. They do stuff. They do stuff. They're watching you right now. You are on a list. You are on a list of many, many things. Where the fuck did I put my everything? I don't have my glasses on because glasses are CIA drones. I'm back. The other Pat had to be dealt with. So now I'm his replacement. I am Pat too. Welcome. A lot of the documents too, other than just like the experiments that they conducted and everything, they also acknowledged that there were legit paranormal going-ons in the world, seemingly all over the place, and not quite sure how to follow it. But they were trying to work on that, and that's where all of these projects come into play, is trying to understand the unknown, and that's all the paranormal and all that other stuff go into. So here we are with 3 big conspiracies. You got GATE, you got MK Ultra, and you have the STARGATE project as well, and they all have very similar missions to accomplish. And of course, at this point, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there pointing out, well, it's ESP. That's what they were doing in GATE. That's what they were trying to do. Stargate, the Gateway tapes, and then going into GATE. Well, hold on. It gets deeper. And of course, they would also bring up, like, why wouldn't they go after the kids? Especially after all those other programs were inevitably canceled. They have end dates. However, GATE seemingly opening, or like beginning, so to speak, in 1901 and going through modern time right now. And at the end of it, it just brings up the question as to why were they really looking for these? Was it really for the remote viewing and ESP? Was there a darker meaning? Was it all faked and just everybody is just out of line and nobody knows what they're talking about, even though thousands of people have very similar stories without even talking to one another and just asking for confirmation about things? Yeah, brings a huge divide, doesn't it? It's almost like your delusions are divided. Fucking happy. I'm so fucking happy I can't understand anything in the world anymore. So going along with that idea that the other projects ended up closing, well, they would end up moving into the school systems and going after the kids, because why are the kids going to say anything? Even if they did, it's just part of the school system. They're not really going to know what's going on. Hell, 30 years later, people don't even know what's going on. Well, I guess that's not to say that nobody knows what's going on. There are certain people who claim to be whistleblowers out there and they're trying to release their information, but then again, you have to take it with a grain of salt because you have no idea how trustworthy these people could be. Are they misinformation agents? Like, who knows? And yeah, that's going really deep into the sauce, but at the same time, you've been fucking with the spadle since the beginning. So are you going to stir it or are you just going to let it burn? However, there are other theories that go into this as well, not just the whole conspiracy theories, which we will circle back to in time. However, I want to bring up that there are multiple other theories, and if I don't bring up one that you've heard, I'm sorry. Put it down in the comments. I'd love to learn about it and see what pieces connect, or if they connect at all, or, that's the only way you're going to get any type of information. There are certain people who believe that due to the fact that everybody was apparently notified in a very small amount of time, they started kind of making it seem like everybody was some type of Manchurian candidate, meaning that you were like a sleeper cell and you had just been awoken. You see these images, you hear these tones, and you start having a flood of memories coming back to you. And people are using that as a way to be like, oh no, am I being activated? Like, what's happening? But at the same time, like, if you were, don't you think you'd get shut the fuck down real quick just because of a sleeper cell and you're acknowledging it, putting it out on the internet? And if nothing's happened, or like if they don't have ties on you, like, I don't know, maybe you are, who knows? I'm not trying to sensationalize anything, but just, if you're concerned about somebody or something, regardless if they have some type of weird phenomena following them or they have some type of special ability, if you find them to be a threat or something like that, they're going to follow anybody. It's proven. We know about this. We grew up during the whole 9/11 things and everything, and the way that the world has changed and how we're always being watched. So, like, yeah, that's just kind of normal now. I don't know how I feel about that. The bad anomaly theory. The Matrix is out there. The GATE program is there to find the bad anomalies. They want to control everything. They want to be able to control the planet and control everything, so that way reality falls underneath whatever they want to do, and they can manipulate everything into whatever they need or want. They claim that those who are in this GATE program, not necessarily the gifted and talented one, like the actual education where they thrive on people becoming brilliant and geniuses and everything. I'm talking about the people who are showing the flashcards and taking the pink drink and all that other stuff. They say that the people who are the flashcard kids are the ones who are these anomalies, who are able to break the mold of whatever they are saying that GATE is. Like, the GATE kids are the viruses, and they're coming in and they're going to destroy this new program that they had basically implemented into society. And that's just one theory. Obviously, it's something we don't understand completely yet, but it is documented. You could find that in some of the redacted or unredacted files of the CIA and the STARGATE project. The good anomaly. It's like the same one as before, but they want to find the good ones, and then they'll be like, okay, well, you can come with us. And then GATE is this whole thing where they're going to like make everything great and so on. It's just copy and paste of the last one, but just the inversion of, instead of suppressing the bad, they're trying to bring in the good. There's your equal divide right there. They're either the bad guys or they're the good guys, depending on what they're doing. However, pushing all that aside, the real question that you have to ask is, why are so many people affected similarly and stricken with this giant bear hug of fear when either thinking about the gifted and talented education programs or even listening to the tapes that they give you? And some people are legit claiming that these are the gateway tapes that they were used during the STARGATE project. And the reason why they bring that up is the fact that there's something called hemisync, which will be talked about deeper when we get into the STARGATE area. But there's a point where he explains that there's certain waves that go into each ear, and there's a differential between both of them, and it causes this hemisync with the brain to cause both sides of your brain to work at the same time. But that like differential, that 4-point differential of whatever he was talking about, again, talked about later, it is viewed by your brain as like a third party, which then opens up this whole other wave frequency that you can connect to, and that's essentially how you can astral project. This is legit. Like, this, there's proof of this, the released documents and everything. So it's been worked on since, I think, the 50s. They say that those tapes that were once used for that are now being used in GATE. And if you were listening before, if you didn't skip over the history of what GATE was and how everything came to be, you should remember that they were working on trying to understand how these kids learned and how they kind of went about in society, and not just focusing on the STEM kids, but the other people, and the 7 range diagram in which certain things fall into. This could have been a continuation of all of that, but used in a different or associative manner, because that was all due from the Monroe Institute. And the Monroe Institute, they had the product, let's say, and they allowed other companies to use said products. So there are an unknown number of entities out there, whether it be doctors or governments or anything like that, that have this technology that was made by this person. So even if this person wasn't necessarily the pinnacle point of who did everything with the testing, it's due to that person's invention and the incompetence of the other people who thought, oh, well, I'm going to use this on kids. If it is obviously for nefarious purposes, if there is good, great things to come from it, then awesome. But that doesn't necessarily always correlate when you start hearing about the fear and the fact that when people listen to those tapes, that they are literally stricken with so much anxiety that their body tenses up and their eyes begin to water. A lot of gray areas, I'll say, for speculation and what is what. Talking about the other accounts of kids being in the GATE program or TAG or what have you, they date back to like 60s, 70s, and in certain cases before then, but not necessarily in like the established government programs, let's say. So take everything with a grain of salt. But there's this video that is of this guy surrounded by kids of different races and heritages, and he's talking to them, and they're talking about ESP, and they're in the GATE program. And this is clearly dated. It's got to be sometime in like the 60s or 70s. And though all of this came to be seemingly all at once over the course of just a few years, All of those accounts are very similar in nature, as we've discussed before. There's people who out there that would believe that, this could be an ARG, an alternative reality game, to where you're just watching the events unfold. Like, you can interact if you want to, kind of build up the storylines and everything. It's like having fun in like the SCP community. However, it brings into question, like, why has no new information come out about it? If it was a big ARG or some type of thing that was just to get people hyped, why nothing new? Why nothing? Like absolutely nothing. Normally there's something that comes about, even in the slightest, as to like, is this 100% like faked, or is this real? Do you have any proof, anything new? And usually there's nothing. Like, every now and then you'll hear about somebody finding some type of connection in like a loose fit manner, but nothing profound, as in like, oh, here's a new document. This literally says gifted and talented education, and we were doing ESP on these kids, or looking and testing for ESP on these kids, and trying to figure out blah, 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 and we did blah. There's nothing. It's been a while. It's been a good while. So as for like the whole thing of it being faked, I don't know about that. But at the same time, I can say that about it being real. But eventually just all comes down to is that either these people don't know or they don't remember. And it's the fact that they remember specific things, but they can't piece how to get all the way through the alphabet. Imagine every like second or third letter is missing, and you were never taught that, or rather it was there, or like you're colorblind and that's the color that you can't see. I don't know. It's disturbing thinking about the whole repressed memory thing. I think for me that's one of the biggest things. Why? Normally that's from like trauma or something horrific in your brain trying to protect you. However, it could have been that pink liquid that people are saying, if it wasn't the fluoride. Because if it was given to them on the way out, or rather even on the way in, if it was on the way in, maybe it was to like boost whatever it was, which then the after effect was to cause your brain to repress those memories or forget or whatever. Or it was afterwards, and on your way out, it was just so that way you just go into like that twilight state and you just kind of forget, and it kind of like acts like a dream. So over so long, it just kind of dissipates and you don't really think about it. I digress. But as you can see, we are so far into this lake right now. We're basically breaching the mantle. All I can really say for a fact for myself is that I am greatly disturbed. Really disturbed at this. I'm disturbed at actions on both sides of the fence when it comes to this type of stuff, because there's the people out there that are just like, no, this couldn't happen. It never happened to me. I was in something that was like that, but those things didn't happen to me. That's cool. People go to church, and there's certain horrible things that priests do to other people. There's horrible things that happen at schools that happen to other people. Did it happen to you? No. But how can you sit there and say for a fact that it didn't happen, especially when so many people have come out and said that? That is saying that they are telling the truth, not that they're just running wild with this new ARG that's online. If that's the case, then fuck them all. But if not, which it seems like it's not, at least hear them out. Okay? You can't just sit there and say that they're absolutely insane, because something someday is going to happen to you that you're going to sit there and wish that everybody believed you. But you're going to be sitting there screaming your ass off, pleading with somebody just to listen to you. And they're not going to do it. So be the person that actually at least listen. I'm not saying validate everything that they're saying. I'm just saying hear them out. And just don't go off the fucking deep end either with the G.A.T.E stuff, because there's a lot of things that, like the star seed theory, and we're reincarnated souls that went into G.A.T.E and just all this other stuff. It's like, sure, that's just as far out there as any of the other theories, but you have absolutely nothing to go on when it comes to specifically that. You're just lumping that in there with everything. And you might be asking yourself, why would I be selected for G.A.T.E? Why would I be put in there? Well, seemingly for any reason. Really, anybody who could open themselves up to their type of curriculum. As you know, that they were going for kids who had really high grades, but then at some point they were looking at the kids with the lowest grades and trying to see how they could help them if they were gifted as well. Now, I'm going to jump forward really quick and talk about something that happened quite recently. I think it was posted last year. But so there's this woman who was talking to her daughter about the Gifted and Talented Education program and how she got accepted into it. And the long and short of it is that all they did was test her eyes. They just shined a light into them and just checked them out and just like, okay, you qualify. Why is that a qualifying factor when there's other kids who are literally brilliant minded, but not offered the opportunity to go. And again, people were saying like, is it colorblind? No. Is it, do they have like a stigma? No. Or something else? Like, yeah, the argument's there, but again, nothing is ever told or comes from that. At least when it comes to the darker side of what GATE could possibly be. Again, all alleged, and the idea is that it might not even be the GATE program in which people are actually thinking. There could be two different entities that go by the same name. If they were to come to you, they would end up taking you out of that class, and oftentimes they would give you a reason as to why you're going out. You have to go do some type of class, or they'd say it's speech therapy or a reading class or what have you, and they'd have you go out and do something but under the guise of a different name. And it was the same conclusion each time. You never really got an answer as to what the hell was actually happening and what they were testing you for. If you did good or bad, are you in danger? Are you healthy? You don't know. You're just going back to class with more questions. And the thing is that just because you were going to these classes for speech therapy or reading classes, there were kids who were reading at college levels in early elementary school. Why were they put into reading classes to help them read better? There were points where the kids would like to be stumbling over the words, yet this other kid who could read at that college level is just like blowing the teacher out of the water. Like, it's confusing as to why that is a necessity for those types of kids. Or like the same thing goes for the people who are in the speech therapy classes. It's confusing as to the reasoning why. And yes, there are a lot of times that, you know, they just took the kid out and made it seem like it was part of that school, even though it may have not been, you never know. Yeah, counterhand to that, there were places that were established for that, and like the parents knew about it. So again, it comes off as there's two separate entities using the same name. Either way, in the end, you'd be contacted in some way or fashion if you made their list. And there's a good chance you might even still be on their radar now. You don't know. But the fuck? Oh, my cat's up there. I'm being watched. What the fuck? There were certain things that you'd be flagged. So if you've exhibited any of these, talked about it, were open about it, and people knew, and they somehow managed to get their way back to GATE or anybody within that project, you'd be flagged. And what would you be flagged for? Well, if you were young in age, oftentimes between like the ages of 9 and 10, but definitely before 13. If you have deja vu often, if you were really bad at sleeping, so if you had insomnia, are they just going after everybody at this point? Because like, holy crap. Interest in high strangeness. So UFOs, the paranormal, ghosts, the unknown unknowns of the world. Because there's known unknowns and then there's the unknown unknowns. You got to worry about the unknown unknowns. If you have a lot of migraines, well, and again, this would be for like kids and everything. Also, if you had a high IQ, not just if you were interested in UFOs, but also if you've seen UFOs or have claimed to see some type of paranormal entity. If you were a kid and you were very good at lucid dreaming and you did it often and you could remember in vivid detail your dreams. Can you do that? And the last weird one that I have on this list that would get you flagged for something is Heads Up 7-Up. I didn't see that one coming. I thought that was just a game. Man, if I had ESP, I would be going to the like blackjack tables all the time. There is a very concerning thing that has happened to a lot of people who were allegedly in GATE. I'm talking about the flashcard ones. There were apparently some after effects for a lot of people. And these were included, but were not limited to, organ failure, chronic illness, massive depression and anxiety, insomnia, memory loss, the overwhelming sense of fear for unknown reasons. Sorry, I'm reading off a list I have. Night terrors. You would end up getting hurt and getting or developing facial scars. An NDE, which is a near experience, specifically when it comes to drowning. I don't know why. It did not explain as to why specifically drowning. Specifically, if you were somebody's firstborn son. If you had a strong sense of moral justice and you always questioned authority, you'd get flagged. And then one that I kept coming across, which I've seen variations of it, and the other one is the bone one. Apparently, if you've never broken a bone, you get flagged. which seems a little weird. I've seen videos of people talking about how they were in it, but also had broken bones. Maybe that was something that was like taken out of their list of do's and do nots. Who knows? I roll a d20 and it comes up 5. Don't be such a gatekeeper. God. Another weird and strange after effect of the GATE program is when you go into those lucid dreams, and obviously the kids who were in this couldn't control it, or could rather control if they were going to lucid dream or not. Some of them could, like they could just turn it off, which is weird. I thought that once you just start a lucid dream, you just keep going and you just don't stop because you can lucid dream, you know? There was one where somebody was like, you know, I started creating like this really cool like world for myself in my dream, and like everything from this to that is what I wanted in it. And then I started seeing other people who were in my life, and then they started talking in real life, and then realized that they both dreamt the same thing. Long story short, this is mall world. That's what they call it, mall world. So it's just a giant mall, and there's a fucking, like, it's an entire existence in this dreamland that people can interact with, and they remember their locations and stuff. Like some going as far as saying that they could literally map their dream. Like if you gave them, like you gave it to a cartographer or something, they could be like, all right, this is how it looks. This is where you'd go. And like, my God. However, it would be really cool if that is real, if you could actually like somehow prove it or like record your dreams, which the government has loosely said that they could do before, and random things I've seen across the interwebs. Which then, after discovering the idea of mall world, or rather, let's say the conceptualization of mall world, it brought up the question, could these kids do this before GATE? And was GATE used to almost fine-tune that process? You know, the whole frequency thing, if you were able to fine-tune it, get it better and more accurate to what you're wanting to do in the dream realm when you're going to sleep, does that have any effect on anything? Is it a way for everybody to get on the same level, like the frequency of life or something, you know? Which there's a lot of people out there that advocate for that. And people wonder if after the GATE program, if GATE itself had decided to, let's say, watch these kids after they were able to go off on their own in their dreams, of course. This brings up the idea of GATE handlers. So think like handlers for like spies and stuff, making sure that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing and you get whatever information you need to get. However, people began to wonder, and I've seen a couple videos on this, is that the entity Hatman, maybe it wasn't an entity at all. A lot of the kids that were in GATE that experienced this, the flashcard kids and everything, they all claim to see this shadowy figure of a person who wears a hat. And like it's like a fedora or even a bowler hat at points, but you can never actually see what they look like. It was always just a shadow, and it always just seemed to observe and watch. And the idea behind the entity of Hatman is that he can like kidnap kids, or like he protects kids. It all depends on what side of the fence you're sitting on when you hear the story. Sometimes people were saying that GATE, while they were in GATE, this entity would make itself known, and that's where it like began for a lot of people. So it brings into question is that if that all is all real and all happening, could that be one of the handlers keeping an eye on the kids, making sure that they're not doing anything? Because they wouldn't necessarily have to follow them around. You just have to wait to like know when they're asleep. But how would they know when they're asleep? It's like, are you Santa Claus? Is Santa Claus part of MK Ultra and GATE? Game on, big boy. So in the end, all of these projects and conspiracies and hidden agendas all seem to be focusing on very, very similar things. So my question to you is this. If you had one corporation that was working on one thing and that got shut down, but you didn't quite reach what you had, wouldn't you open up another? Wouldn't you continue to try to do your research or your art or what have you? If a musician is leaving a band, sometimes they join another band because they're still a musician. They're just not in that band anymore. They still have a goal to accomplish, but now it's mixed in with these other goals, but there's still that goal there. So do you think that they would just stop? or carry on day-to-day business as usual? Let me know down in the comments. And if you're a GATE kid, let me know about your experience, please. Was I a GATE kid? I don't know. Maybe. I can't remember. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Let me know what you want me to do next. All right, take care, guys.